Before he was John Wayne, he was a kid with a girl's name who got teased so badly he let everyone call him Duke instead. Before the Oscars, he slept in his car and ate leftovers from studio lots. He auditioned 52 times in 1 year and got rejected every single time. Then Hollywood finally opened the door. But success brought something darker. There were affairs, scandals, and an interview where he said things about race that still haunt his legacy. The man who represented American strength carried secrets that tell a very different story. Marion Robert Morrison entered the world on May 26, 1907, in a small house on South 2nd Street in Winterset, Iowa. And from the very start, he carried a kind of weight that people talked about. The Winterset Madisonian printed a note just 4 days later, saying the newborn weighed 13 pounds, almost double the 7.5-pound average back then. People whispered that he was the biggest baby born in the area that year, and his parents, Clyde and Mary, both barely in their 20s, could only stare at him with a mix of pride and worry. They had named him after Chaplain Marion Morrison, a Civil War relative who died in 1862 at Gettysburg, hoping the name would carry strength. But the family struggled from the beginning. Their home at 117 South 1st Street had more bills than comfort, and the Morrisons kept moving from place to place as Clyde's work shifted and money thinned out. 2 years later, Iowa was hit with a whooping cough epidemic that swept through the state, taking around 5,000 young lives each year. Marion was only 2 when the disease reached Earlham, where the family had moved after Clyde's drugstore in Winterset failed. Records from that time show hundreds of new cases appearing every month, turning every cough into something families feared. Somehow, Marion survived in a town where so many didn't, and that survival became the first sign of the resilience people would one day see on screen. His parents saw a strong child pushing through danger long before Hollywood ever did. In 1914, everything changed again when Clyde defaulted on a $500 loan, and the family had to leave Iowa altogether. Doctors also insisted that Clyde needed a drier climate, so they packed up and headed west to Glendale, California. That move turned a frightened boy into someone new. In Glendale, he got an 80-pound Airedale dog named Duke, a companion that followed him everywhere. Marion walked to the fire station with the dog so often that the firefighters started calling him Duke, too, and the nickname wrapped around him like armor. It protected him at school, where kids teased him for having a name they thought sounded feminine, and soon even he forgot that Marion had ever been the first name on his birth record. The boy with the big dog slowly became the boy who would grow into John Wayne. As he got older, football became the next thing that carried him forward. By 1925, he was at USC with a scholarship, playing as a strong and promising athlete. But life bent again in 1926 when he broke his collarbone in a game against Notre Dame. The injury cost him his scholarship and forced him to find work. During the summer, he had already taken a job at Fox Studios, hauling heavy props for $35 a week, moving bison and equipment across dusty sets. After the injury, he threw himself into that world full-time. He was young and determined, showing up for 12-hour shifts and grabbing extra roles for a few dollars whenever someone needed a background player. In Brown of Harvard in 1926, he appeared as an uncredited Yale football player, hoping that one day someone might remember his face. His first real step forward came with Words and Music in 1929, where he appeared as Duke Morrison for the first and only time on screen. It wasn't a big part, and most people didn't even notice him, but he was paid his usual $35 a week and felt a quiet thrill when the movie came out on September 29, 1929. His friend Ward Bond had a small role too, and the bond they formed there followed them throughout their lives. It was tiny progress, But it was progress. Even before that small credit, Lone Star Productions had signed him for $35 a week in 1928 and used him in 29 low-budget westerns. These films were fast, often shot in 3 days, and pushed straight into rural theaters. Most viewers never learned the actors' names, and the studios rarely cared if the actors got hurt. During Riverside Fire in 1928, he tried a dangerous horse stunt that tore the ligaments in his neck. But he kept working because he had no other choice. There was no insurance and no comfort. He ate leftovers from the studio commissary and sometimes slept in his car between shoots, holding on to the hope that something bigger might eventually open up. In 1930, Raoul Walsh changed his life by casting him in The Big Trail. It was a huge production costing around $2 million, and Walsh decided to rename him without asking. He picked John Wayne, partly inspired by Anthony Wayne of the Revolutionary War, and studio executives agreed the name sounded stronger. For the first time, Marion Morrison disappeared, and John Wayne appeared on set, earning $105 a week. But even that big moment stumbled, because the film flopped and lost around $400,000 at the box office. The failure pushed Wayne back into low-budget work, and for years the big break that should have saved him became the thing that held him down. By 1932, his situation had sunk even lower. He took jobs in Poverty Row cereals for as little as $7 a week. He slept in his car again and lived on cheap food between auditions. That year, he auditioned 52 times, and every single one was a rejection. Major studios saw him as a disposable cowboy actor and nothing more, and the exhaustion might have broken someone else, but Wayne kept pushing because he didn't know how to stop. During the same period, Mascot Pictures tried turning him into St. John Sandy Saunders in a series of 2 real westerns made between 1932 and 1933. There were around 70 films in this run, though he didn't always appear as the lead. He couldn't sing, so they dubbed his voice, and he hated when fans asked him to sing afterward. Riders of Destiny in 1933 was the first big one, made on a budget under $12,000, shot in just a few days. Everything was fast and cheap, meant more for action than storytelling. Still, these movies kept him visible and kept his name alive. Between 1933 and 1935, he worked with Lone Star and Monogram again, making 52 westerns with budgets around $11,000 each. The pace was brutal. Blue Steel in 1934 even led to a moment during a saloon brawl scene where he accidentally broke a co-star's jaw because the fight got out of hand. It showed how raw and unpredictable these shoots were and how much physical risk he lived with just to stay employed. But these films carved out his reputation as someone dependable, someone who always showed up and worked hard. While his career moved in chaotic loops, his personal life tangled even more. His first marriage was to Josephine Saenz in 1933. Their divorce came in 1935, but that didn't end their connection. They still had children together afterward, with Michael in 1934, Tony in 1936, and Patrick in 1937. It was unusual for the time and revealed how complicated and intertwined their lives remained even when they weren't married anymore. Then came Esperanza Hope Bauer and the marriage that began in Mexico City on February 24, 1939. The ceremony was soaked in alcohol, and the honeymoon night turned violent when she stabbed him during a drunken argument. The marriage that followed was filled with accusations, jealousy, and physical fights. Both of them accused the other of infidelity, and courts were dragged into the mess more than once. It was a dark chapter that contrasted sharply with the strong, heroic image he carried on screen. Things grew even harder in 1938 when he owed $20,000 in back taxes. Money became a shadow that followed him everywhere. Esperanza struggled with pill addiction, and her unpredictable behavior led to 17 beatings that court documents later confirmed. Wayne covered bruises with makeup, hoping no one would see the truth behind the public image. This mixture of financial stress, secrecy, and violence created one of the deepest low points of his life. John Wayne's rise hit its first real spark in 1939 when Stagecoach changed everything for him. But the path toward that moment was rough long before the cameras rolled. John Ford had pitched the project to 200 studios, each one turning it down until David O. Selznick finally agreed. Wayne stepped onto that set, carrying the weight of every earlier rejection. And even then, the work was punishing. A horse accident crushed his ribs, yet he kept going because he knew this film could shift his life. There was a drunk scene that dragged on for 89 takes before Ford felt satisfied. And when the movie finally reached the public, it pulled in $1.1 million and earned Thomas Mitchell an Oscar. Wayne's contract with Republic suddenly jumped to $2,500 per week, and soon his salary for Flying Tigers in 1942 reached $100,000, which would be more than $1.5 million today. Even so, while he was only 35, he was denied military service because of an old football injury and a family hardship deferment. With the war raging overseas, he stayed in Hollywood and made 25 films between 1942 and 1945, becoming the biggest star on American screens while the world fought around him. Yet fame didn't protect him from pain at home. In 1944, his wife Josephine Hope swallowed 100 Seconal pills in a near-fatal overdose. They were locked in a bitter divorce fight, and Hope claimed Wayne had affairs with 6 actresses, naming Marlene Dietrich and Claire Trevor among them. When the divorce moved forward, Hope received a $300,000 settlement in 1945, a shocking number for the time. The public reacted with disbelief, and Wayne's image took a hit. Even then, he pushed through and kept working. The scandal followed him for years, but he did not slow down. During those same years, he threw himself into war bond tours, traveling across the United States between 1943 and 1944. His presence helped raise a record $3 billion for the war effort. He visited 200,000 troops in Italy and North Africa and lifted spirits wherever he went. Crowds lined up in massive numbers at his rallies. But there were things the public didn't know. The famous footage showing Wayne shooting down a Japanese plane had been filmed on a Hollywood soundstage, not a battlefield. Despite never being in real combat, his war films, especially Flying Tigers and The Fighting Seabees, turned him into a symbol of American toughness. His Bond events were so effective that the government publicly acknowledged him as a major force in boosting enlistment and sales. Still, success never erased the pressure that followed him onto sets. When he worked on They Were Expendable in 1945, the experience turned into a painful clash. John Ford, a real Navy captain and a man who deeply respected those who fought in the war, was furious that Wayne had not served. He taunted him in front of the crew and called him a coward. The tension finally erupted into a physical fight, where Ford punched Wayne and left him ashamed and blackout drunk. The production fell apart soon after when Ford fell 20 feet off a scaffold and broke his leg, forcing Robert Montgomery to direct the remaining scenes. Ford admired Montgomery because he was a real war hero, and that only made Wayne feel more pushed aside. When the film flopped, it marked a low point for Wayne, revealing a deep divide between Hollywood's on-screen heroes and the men who had lived through the war. As the war ended, Wayne's life moved into another storm of change. Between 1946 and 1952, he stepped into what many consider the golden stretch of his career, with hits like Red River in 1948 and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon in 1949. During this period, He was married to Esperanza Bauer, but everything shifted in 1952 when he traveled to Peru while scouting locations for the Alamo. There he met actress Pilar Palete, who was 16 years younger and still married. Their romance grew fast and loud, drawing massive attention. In 1956, a staged shooting incident involving her husband Weldy, who was accused of attacking a publisher over rumors of the affair, only added fire to the gossip before it was exposed as a hoax. Wayne's divorce from Boer became final in 1953, and he married Pilar on January 22, 1954. Later, she revealed that she had an abortion in 1953 because she feared the scandal would ruin Wayne's career, a decision that stayed with her for years. Their daughter Marissa arrived in 1961, and their son Ethan in 1966, weaving new life into Wayne's story, even as the pressure around him grew. Red River itself carried its own storm. Howard Hawks pushed for realism, and the knife fight between Wayne and Montgomery Clift demanded 74 takes. Clift embraced method acting with raw focus, while Wayne teased him and called him a wimp. That tension settled deep and sparked a feud that stretched for 2 decades. The film went on to earn more than $10 million, cementing both actors' names, but the personal distance between them only widened. Wayne used his rising influence to create something of his own. In 1949, he founded Batjack Productions, originally Wayne Fellows Productions. This gave him real control over the stories he wanted to tell. Sands of Iwo Jima became one of the first big successes, pulling in $8.5 million and giving Wayne an Oscar nomination. Batjack let him choose scripts, which meant he could reject films like High Noon in 1952 because he felt its message was too soft and politically wrong. The studio produced many films, including The Alamo in 1960, which cost him much of his own fortune. Even so, Batjack stayed active for decades and kept shaping Wayne's legacy all the way until his death in 1979. But his career also grew wrapped in the politics of the time. In 1949, the MCA blacklist named more than 200 Hollywood figures as suspected communists. Wayne became a loud voice in the movement. He testified before HUAC in 1952, and his involvement played a part in ending more than 100 careers, including the career of John Ford's own son. Wayne helped form the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, and his words fed into the fear and paranoia that defined the McCarthy era. Many artists lost their livelihoods for years, and Wayne became one of the most controversial faces of the blacklist. Even as these political waves moved through Hollywood, he continued to take on physically demanding roles. On The Quiet Man in 1952, Maureen O'Hara insisted on doing her own stunts. During the famous fight scene, Wayne threw a punch that knocked her unconscious for 3 days. She was dragged across the ground until her arms were bruised and raw. The scene became iconic, but O'Hara later admitted that it was one of the hardest shoots of her life. The film had a budget of $1.75 million and earned $3.8 million, yet behind that success were real bruises and real consequences. His superstardom in the 1950s grew larger each year. In 1953, Hondo became a major hit, earning $8.2 million on a $3.5 million budget. Wayne's character in the film inspired him to adopt his Navajo son, adding a personal layer to the story. But his heavy smoking, sometimes up to 6 packs a day, started catching up to him fast. By 1956, he faced a frightening cancer scare and went through a lung biopsy. Even after that, he struggled to quit. The scare pressured him to speak about smoking-related illnesses, yet the habit stayed with him for years. The Searchers came out in 1956 and is often called his masterpiece, but the film carried a darker shadow. Its harsh and racist portrayal of Native Americans caused controversy that lasted decades. To make the scalping scenes feel authentic, the prop department used real human hair, reportedly taken from World War II battlefield remains. Wayne's character, Ethan Edwards, represented an extreme level of hatred, even considering killing his own niece because she lived among Comanche people. The racism was not only in the story, but in the details the filmmakers chose to highlight, showing the troubling attitudes held by Hollywood at the time. His health stayed fragile after the biopsy. In 1957, he returned to work in The Wings of Eagles, playing naval aviator Frank Spig Weed, who became paralyzed. Wayne used his own fear and pain to fuel the performance. Audiences who knew about his health struggles felt it deeply, and the role became one of his most emotional. His political convictions shaped his choices again when he produced and starred in Big Jim McLean in 1952, a film about HUAC investigators chasing communists in Hawaii. He turned down major roles like the lead in The Bridge on the River Kwai in 1957 because he feared it would cast him as a war hero once more, and he felt the story's direction was too uncertain for his values. These decisions showed how much his beliefs influenced his path, even if it meant walking away from roles that later became legendary. His personal life carried its own heartbreak. His affair with Gail Russell in the late 1950s spiraled into tragedy. In 1957, she was arrested for drunk driving, and the stress of public attention mixed with her struggle with alcohol. After her divorce, her health crumbled. She died alone in 1961, surrounded by empty liquor bottles. Wayne, shattered by the news, paid $50,000 for her funeral. The gesture surprised many because their relationship had been full of turmoil. It revealed something heavy about Wayne, showing a deep sadness behind his public strength. John Wayne poured himself into the Alamo in 1960, with a kind of determination that surprised even the people closest to him. He took $12 million of his own money and tied it to the film when United Artists offered only $2.5 million. He even put up his homes and vehicles as collateral because he believed the story needed to be told the right way. And even though the film brought in around $20 million worldwide and opened on October 24th as one of the biggest releases of the year, he still lost about $2.5 million personally once the heavy production and marketing bills settled. He laughed years later that he couldn't even buy chewing gum in Texas without someone co-signing for him. Behind that joke, though, was a truth about how deeply he had stretched himself. The film's set carried darker memories, too. 6 crew members died during a Rio Grande stampede scene, a reminder of how massive and dangerous the production really was. Soon, the spotlight moved to his only Oscar win. In 1969, he stepped into the eye-patched world of True Grit and finally held the Academy Award that had escaped him for decades. The patch wasn't just a costume choice. He had undergone several eye surgeries, and the covering helped him work without pain. The character Rooster Cogburn came from the real-life Deputy Marshal Heck Thomas, who hunted some of the most notorious outlaws of the 1890s. When Wayne accepted the trophy on April 7, 1970, he joked that he wished he had worn the patch 35 years earlier if that was what it took to be noticed. That same sense of pride carried into The Longest Day in 1962. He earned $250,000 for the film, while most stars made $25,000. It was a deliberate move aimed at Fox executive Darryl F. Zanuck, who had mocked Wayne's financial trouble after the Alamo. During a Normandy reenactment scene, Wayne broke his ankle jumping over a wall. He refused to stop working. The film turned into one of the great war epics of the decade and won 2 Academy Awards. But prestige did not protect him from the storms ahead. Between 1970 and 1975, he was tangled in studio politics and personal frustration. The battle over The Godfather showed this clearly. He was considered for Vito Corleone, but Francis Ford Coppola wanted Marlon Brando. Wayne's camp pushed back and used financial pressure to tilt the role towards someone they believed fit the image of a traditional American patriarch. Brando countered with a demand for $2 million and 80% of the film's profits, a request Paramount refused immediately. Wayne was cut from contention, while Brando later returned with a revised deal of $250,000 and 10% of the profits. When the film reached $287 million globally, Wayne found himself watching a classic he nearly stepped into from the outside. His own health battles stepped into the middle of all this power and noise. Back in 1964, he had undergone a radical pneumonectomy that took his entire left lung and 2 ribs. He was 57, and the survival rate hovered around 40%. Years of smoking up to 5 packs a day had cornered him. He lost about 40 pounds after the operation, yet returned to work within months. Even more shocking was the fact that he continued smoking for years afterward. Doctors warned him again and again, but he pushed forward anyway. His recovery was so surprising that his case ended up in medical discussions as an example of both danger and resilience. Then came The Green Berets in 1968, one of his most debated films. It carried a budget of $7 million and received full support from the Pentagon. They provided weapons, helicopters, real Green Berets, and access to Fort Benning. The Pentagon even had script approval to keep the war's image positive. The movie made $21 million at the box office, but faced harsh criticism for selling a version of the Vietnam War that wasn't real. Investigators later revealed that the atrocities shown in the film mirrored those committed by U.S. troops, not the enemy. The Pentagon eventually banned the film, and it became a symbol of propaganda and Hollywood's willingness to bend truth. By 1970, he was back on set for Rio Lobo, his final film with Howard Hawks. He was 63 and worn down from earlier injuries. During a riding scene, a horse bucked him hard enough to fracture his pelvis. The pain forced directors to film him mostly from one side. He used a cane off camera and pushed himself through every scene. The film's story about a seasoned veteran searching for traitors felt strangely close to his own fight with time and limitation. It also signaled the quiet fading of an era. In 1971, he sat for a Playboy interview that would follow him for decades. He admitted to receiving 3 draft deferments during World War II and even called his choices cowardly. The honesty shocked people, especially veterans who had gone to war while he portrayed heroes on screen. It reopened arguments about patriotism and image and created a long shadow over his reputation. Rooster Cogburn arrived in 1975 with hopes of reviving the magic of True Grit. It reunited him with Katharine Hepburn, yet it stumbled badly. The film brought in only about 17 million worldwide and just $4.5 million in US and Canadian rentals. Critics didn't hold back. Some called it dull. Gene Siskel gave it 2 stars and said it was a stupid story filled with holes. At the same time, Wayne was recovering from an eye surgery that left him temporarily blind in his left eye, which made filming difficult. The disappointment showed that even his legendary presence couldn't guarantee success anymore. Trouble soon reached his family in a different way. In 1977, Batjack Productions, run by his son, Michael Wayne, collapsed under $10 million in debt. The company had once been a proud symbol of Wayne's independence. Now, it was sinking. To save it, Wayne personally gave $2 million to keep things from falling apart completely. Hollywood was stunned to see how close the company came to ruin and how much he sacrificed to keep the family legacy from disappearing. The Shootist entered theaters in 1976 with a story that felt almost like a mirror. Wayne played a dying gunslinger struggling with cancer. At the time, he wasn't terminal, but he was ill enough that he had to be hospitalized during production, spending 2 weeks under care for influenza. Lauren Bacall felt uneasy acting beside someone whose real condition echoed the script. The film carried a heavy atmosphere because audiences knew his past health battles and sensed the unease in the air. Years later, when stomach cancer entered the picture, the film took on a haunting finality. The stomach cancer came to light in January 1979 during what was meant to be a routine gallbladder procedure. Doctors discovered a malignant tumor and spent 9 hours removing his entire stomach. It was his 4th major cancer surgery. He refused chemotherapy afterward and told people he would not go out whimpering. The tumor was removed successfully, yet the weight of the disease pulled him down. By June of that same year, he died at UCLA Hospital at the age of 71. His estate was valued at $40 million after settling $12 million in debts. His will left nothing to his third wife, Pilar, despite their 20 years together. Everything was divided among his 7 children, sparking speculation about the private, unspoken tensions inside the family. His Newport Beach mansion sold for $5.5 million in 1980, showing just how large his financial footprint really was. Months after his death, he was honored again. On June 9, 1980, President Jimmy Carter awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Carter, a liberal Democrat, surprised many when he praised Wayne as a symbol of grit and determination. The award placed Wayne among a small group of people who had received both the Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Gold Medal. Even his name carried myths long after he was gone. His real name was Marion Robert Morrison, born on May 26, 1907. Despite rumors, there was no legal change to Marion Mitchell or Marion Michael. His birth certificate and OSS application confirmed the original name. The confusion probably came from family habits and his mother's wish to use the name Robert for another child. His legacy carried heavier shadows too. In the Playboy interview from 1971, he made racist comments that surfaced again and again in debates about his reputation. He used slurs and called black people the lowest form of humanity. He also defended apartheid in the 1970s, saying it was the only place where white men could live in peace. The comments shocked fans who viewed him as a representation of honor on screen, revealing a deep and troubling contradiction between the man and the myth. The Wayne family later faced painful tragedies of their own. His grandson, Brendan Wayne, died of a drug overdose in 2020 at age 40 after years of struggling with addiction. And his daughter, Aissa, wrote in her 1991 memoir that she suffered abuse from her mother, Pilar. These stories pulled back the curtain on a family marked by grief and hidden wounds. Money continued to reveal new parts of his life even after his estate settled. Though his estate was public at $25 million, much of his real wealth sat inside Batjack, which sold for $12 million in 1980. Through Batjack, he controlled film rights quietly and protected profits away from public eyes. His real estate choices, including having the Orange County Airport renamed in his honor that same year, kept his influence alive long after he was gone.